This is the W.T.F. Bach podcast.
Right, that work those fingers.
This is the podcast about all things Johann Sebastian Bach. Brought to you by Evan Shinners. W.T.F. Bach. Brought to you by Evan Shinners. Join W.T.F. Bach as he guides your mind through a contrapuntal journey.
And now here's W.T.F. Bach.
It's Evan Shinners here. You know what the goal of this podcast is. It's to get you to hear Bach the way I hear Bach, to help you gain more appreciation for his music, and hopefully all music by listening in a different way. This is an interview episode. I aim to bring onto this show people who come from various backgrounds, but are somehow all united around Bach, and at least in this first season discuss the art of fugue. So, who is the guest today? Well, another question, is there a most knowledgeable Bachian alive? For if there is, then Christoph Wolff is certainly in contention for that title, and he is today's guest. The former head of the Bach archive in Leipzig, Mr. Christoph Wolff, is quite the academic and scholar, emeritus professor at Harvard, on the graduate faculty of Juilliard from 2010 until 2018. But not only Bach research, Wolff was also the former chair of the Academy for Mozart Forschung, that's Mozart research. I've been reading this man's book since I was 16 years old. I must say that it was quite the privilege and highlight along my personal Bach road to interview him. His influence is inescapable. You cannot run from the big bad Wolff. There is scarcely a time when I don't flip through his books to clarify a particular detail, idea, or concept. And I bet every serious Bach player, lover, scholar in the world owns either Bach, Essays on His Life and Music. That's a series of essays on diverse aspects from his life and work. I'm constantly consulting this book. The New Bach Reader, that's very highly recommended. It's essentially a book in which every contemporary document about Bach or with regard to Bach, including even things like his receipts to a liquor tax collector, or Bach's review of the musical proficiency of the choristers entering the Thomas Choir. Very interesting book. Johann Sebastian Bach, the learned musician, is Mr. Wolff's great biography. It was a finalist for the Pulitzer Prize in 2001. And as recently as 2020, Bach's Musical Universe, the composer and his work. Now, aside from the books and countless articles in scholarly journals, being the director of the Bach archive in Leipzig means that he oversaw a great deal of the publication of the NBA. The real NBA, the Neue Bach-Ausgabe, the new Bach edition. He saw the completion of it, as he mentions in the interview. If you pick up a copy, for example, therefore, of the Barenreiter edition of the Goldberg Variations, his name alone appears as the editor. It's a bit of a serious job. But for such a serious job, and for a man so deeply involved in one of the most precise areas of knowledge, he's very far from being judgmental or close-minded. I mention that because it's easy, especially now, with the dominance of historical performance practice, to fall into that trap, to say, form a camp, when the question is almost a divisive one about how could Bach's music sound versus how should it sound. But when Herr Wolff talked about the Goldberg Variations, he mentioned Gustav Leonhardt and Rudolph Serkin. He can appreciate both. And I felt that this interview would be a good interview to occupy the last guest spot on Season 1, because yes, there will be a Season 2, since we discussed the last fugue of The Art of Fugue. Hence, I waited almost a year to release this interview until the episodes had caught up with it, but now here we are, one fugue away from the end, and this last interview on Season 1. So thank you very much for listening. Sit back, relax, and enjoy, because this is a big one, folks. This is Christoph Wolff.
The one and only Christoph Wolff. And here is the one and only Christoph Wolff. We are so pleased. The one and only Christoph Wolff is with us. Christoph Wolff.
Christoph Wolff, thank you very much for being on the show.
Very pleased to be here.
You are certainly one of the most important minds on current Bach thought, and I figure it's really impossible to do research about Bach without crossing the wonderful work which you've laid down. So the question that most of us, I'm sure, have on our minds is, what do you think about Jimi Hendrix?
Jimi Hendrix, the musician. Okay, why? I love the way he performs, and that's fine. But it doesn't really further my research or any knowledge about J.S. Bach. It only tells me that music has come a long way since J.S. Bach in the 18th century.
One of the most fascinating things about your work is that in the year 2000, when you published The Learned Musician, it seemed like we knew all there was to know, and then 20 years later, Bach's Musical Universe hits the shelf, and there's all this new knowledge So what can we expect in another 20 years?
Well, I think Bach research continues. And I'm very pleased that it continues, because there is so much to discover all the time. And, it reflects somehow the depth and breadth of the music of this unique composer.
And do you have a personal favorite piece of writing about Bach, be it research or even poetry or flight of fancy, just some piece of words, that made you feel like, that person got it. That person really felt it.
Well, I think one of my most fascinating readings as a young person was Albert Schweitzer's Bach book, which I think fascinated me. I only learned much later that, his biographical studies and also some of his other writings were not really getting to the core of Bach. But at the same time, I think he opened my heart for listening in a way that I think I'm always grateful for. And I think it also he also opened my curiosity about this person and his music.
And he was an extremely young man when he published the first edition of the biography.
Yes, he was a young man, a young academic. He just had switched from theology to medicine. He spent his life in Africa as a doctor to help, the poor black villages in Central Africa. So, I mean, the human aspect of his life also is, of course, something that, is of great importance. And I think it relates, the music of Bach to his way of being ready to help humanity on a level that goes much beyond the art.
And you yourself are the son of a theologian. Do you wake up on Sundays and do you know this is the Sunday which Bach wrote this particular cantata for?
I do wake up that way, but, I'm no longer, a church-going person. It's a strong aspect of my background, but, I'm a different person than I used to be.
Do you ever think, okay, it's the second Sunday after Advent, let's listen to the second Sunday after Advent cantata? Do you ever celebrate the year this way?
Sometimes do that, because I feel that Bach's music really is related to the seasons of the church year, and therefore, I think it helps to understand the context of where the music is, originating.
I have a question that I admit, as an amateur Bach scholar, I have really failed to find the answer to, which is, where does the seal come from? And how did this become the sort of official logo of Bach?
The seal as such is a type of a seal, a mirror monogram, that is quite standard in Bach's time. If you look at the publications of Johann Mattheson, the writer and music theorist and composer, you see that his initials JM are also mirrored, and he had that as his seal. So that is the origin, a standard mirror monogram. But the way Bach's was created, with the crest around it and the crown, is something that Bach did not invent. I assume, we have no particular knowledge, I assume it was a gift of Prince Leopold when he was in Köthen, because he used to have a different monogram when he worked in Weimar. So I think the earliest occurrence of this famous JSB mirror image monogram occurs in documents of 1722.
And this would have been a wax seal which he was sealing his letters with.
Exactly. Well, the seal would probably be a metal, most likely silver or some other metal stamp that you would impress on wax.
And so we have this image because we still have actual physical wax that Bach himself sealed with this metal stamp.
Absolutely, yes.
Wow, fascinating. You have mentioned before that one of the hardest things for us to imagine is the time management of this man, because his output and his duties are astounding. And perhaps you could correct me, I think there's one volume in the Neue Bach-Ausgabe just dedicated to the sketches of Bach and things that were crossed out, drafts, as it were. But it's so few. So does this mean that Bach really wrote most of his works in just one go?
I think for the most part he wrote his works straight through. He didn't make the kind of sketches that Beethoven is famous for. I mean, he really labored over shaping a musical theme until he had it in its proper shape, and then could start working. And then he also sketched out certain elaborations of thematic motivic processes and so forth. We do not have anything like it for Bach. I think Bach started by forming his ideas in his head and then put them down, rather speedily. He made mistakes, or he wanted to make corrections. It's for that reason that he never wrote into, folded manuscripts. He wrote sheets after sheets, so that if he, made a boo-boo somewhere, he would not lose the whole thing. So he could replace a single sheet or bifolio and then replace it. For the most part, we know that he wrote the compositions he didn't have time to labor over sketches and so forth. And, only in a number of very peculiar instances where he really hit a hard spot, we see that he wrote a sketch. He sometimes did this at the bottom of the page where he was, notating the score.
In this sort of antiquated, I'm not sure how you call that sort of notation, the tablature notation or something.
Tablature notation, yeah, that's keyboard tablature notation, which is shorthand and didn't use much space. And he could easily use that in order to try out certain things.
Yeah. I love imagining that all this composition took place at a desk and not the romanticized image that we get of the composer at the piano chain-smoking cigarettes and crumbling up papers and throwing it over the shoulder, that all of Bach's composition took place in relative silence at a desk. How silent was it really?
Well, I think, some compositions, especially keyboard compositions, are probably notated improvisations and worked out improvisations. So, we certainly do have works that he initiated by performing at the keyboard, organ or harpsichord or clavichord. But for vocal works or concertos, instrumental ensemble works, and also I think quite a number of keyboard works, he worked it out on the desk. And there is one reference to the Well-Tempered Clavier, the first part of the Well-Tempered Clavier, that he started this when he was locked up in Weimar by the Duke because he irritated the Duke with his abrupt departure and acceptance of a post at a neighboring court. So he was put into an arrest room, and apparently was given paper and pen, but had no keyboard. So there's a later report that he started writing out the preludes and fugues of the Well-tempered clavier under these conditions.
Right, where time hung heavy on his hands, or whatever the phrase is.
Exactly.
A couple questions about your life with Bach. You were, I believe, in your early 30s when the Hand exemplar of the Goldberg Variations was discovered. Was this the most exciting single Bach discovery in your life?
I wouldn't put it that way. I think the first exciting discovery happened when I was working on my dissertation. But definitely, I mean, the Goldberg canons, the discovery in actually exactly 1975 was a very important and perhaps in many ways the most significant discovery that I came across. But, you know, the initial discovery when I was, in my early 20s was a manuscript in the State Library in Berlin that contained a copy of Bach, a copy by Bach of a Magnificat by the Italian composer Antonio Caldara. And it happened at the moment when I was in the process of reconstructing Bach's library of other composers so that I could examine what he learned from other composers. And I saw that, this Caldara manuscript, which was the first one of a number of manuscripts in his hand, that helped me to understand how, Bach self-studied seriously the music of other composers because he never really had a composition teacher.
Right. I wanted to ask you about your graduate work and those other composers on his shelf. Do you know which music from other composers perhaps he adored playing over and over again?
Well, I think the important thing is that all the pieces that he copied from other composers' works, he also performed. So he did not use them only for reading and studying. We know that he went as far back as the works of Palestrina. So 16th century music, we know of no other 18th century contemporary of Bach who would go so far back in the history of music. And then, we have Frescobaldi, and we have Froberger and Buxtehude, and, the major composers, instrumental composers of 17th century music, whom he devoted a lot of attention to. And then, he went to study his contemporaries. He copied works by Handel. We don't know that Handel copied works of Bach, but Bach certainly performed Handel and Porpura and Pergolesi. So his contemporaries, and he went as far into the most modern composers that he could put his hands on.
It's fascinating. In the meantime, you were the director of the most prestigious Bach archive in the world, and you oversaw much of the publication of the Neue Bach-Ausgabe, which is the most complete and sort of critical reproduction of the music itself. Are there mistakes in this Neue Bach-Ausgabe, which the editors, faithfully trying to reproduce everything with accuracy, faithfully reproduce a possible mistake of Bach's?
There are mistakes in there, and the mistakes were, of course, accidental, not related to poor scholarship. In fact, all the editors of the Neue Bach-Ausgabe were extremely serious and careful scholars, but what is recognized as mistakes today relates mostly to the discovery of new source materials or a re-evaluation of the available sources. And therefore, during my time at the Bach Archive, we not only celebrated the completion of the Neue Bach-Ausgabe in 2006, but also started in 2010 the series of revised volumes. So there are a number of volumes in the Neue Bach-Ausgabe that in the meantime have been issued in revised form. So they replace what used to be, let's say, the edition of the B minor Mass, to give you perhaps the most prominent example. So the B minor Mass has been edited twice for the new Bach-Ausgabe, one in 1956 and the second time in 2010 or 11 in a revised volume.
How much music is missing? How many of the cantatas are actually missing? The St. Luke Passion, how much music are we really missing from Bach?
Well, I wish I could give you exact information. We do have some clues based on vocal works where we do have the published texts published during Bach's lifetime, but we do not have the scores, like the score of the music of the St. Mark Passion. We do have its text, and we have also texts of quite a few secular cantatas where the music is completely lost. We have much less of a clue when it comes to instrumental works. So we can take a guess, because in both Köthen and in Weimar we have some information on the deliveries of paper to Bach for, the purpose of composition. But when we stack up the compositions that were composed in Weimar or in Köthen, we see that there are several hundred bifolios that must have existed and would probably not have been thrown away, which contained works by instrumental works and possibly also vocal works by Bach. So it's hard to come by an exact estimate, but it's quite sure that a considerable number of his works are lost. I venture to say, however, that the pieces that were important to him and to his students and to his family, that those have not disappeared. It tells me that if the St. Mark Passion is lost, it was not a work that Bach estimated in the same way as his St. Matthew Passion and the St. John Passion. I mean, that's a suspicion I have, but I think it's quite reasonable.
And speaking of missing music, the Art of Fugue, do you want to see the conclusion, or has it sort of, because of the way that it has gone down in history, has it served you better as a mystery?
Well, it's definitely a mystery, and it still is. I do believe that the work was actually completed or nearly completed, and the crucial aspect is is related to the final quadruple fugue, and that breaks off after 270 plus measures. It's the longest fugue he ever wrote, even as a fragment. And so I think what was missing was not a very long piece, but a segment that combined the four themes. And if you want to compose a quadruple fugue, you better start with a combination of the themes in order to find out whether they can be combined. And so I think Bach sketched out. He most likely did not do a fair copy of the combinatorial part, but I think it was in a way completed in his head, and also in terms of some drafts that he tried out But unfortunately, these drafts have been lost, as we also lost other materials from the Art of Fugue, although what we do have of the work really gives us a very good idea of the overall shape of the piece, and also tells us that what is missing is really the end of this very last quadruple fugue.
Now, is it possible that it could turn up, or is it really lost? Is someone going to take down a painting and find it on the backing of the painting?
No, it's quite possible that it is still surviving somewhere. We know that the manuscript was in the hand. Was after 1750, after Bach's death, in the hands of his son Carl Philipp Emanuel. And Carl Philipp Emanuel lent it out to colleagues he trusted, and so it's possible that some material ended up and may still turn up someday. I wouldn't give up hope, but I think it's a slim, very slim possibility.
And this note in the obituary that says that the conclusion would have contained all 4 themes and they would have been note by note inverted. Is that to be taken literally, or is that sort of going along with the rhetorical style of the day?
No, I think it is to be taken literally. Otherwise, Carl Philipp Emanuel would not have put it that way. So I think it is a deliberate attempt at mirroring the 4 parts, as Bach did also in the 2 mirror fugues that have survived in complete form.
Right. You've called the Art of Fugue, or at least parts of the Art of Fugue, uncharted territory. What do you mean by that?
Well, it is in a way the first systematic exploration of the techniques of fugue as demonstrated on the basis of settings that constitute real movements. So prior to Bach, fugue was a technique and not really a genre. And the quality of a genre was defined by Bach in his 2 volumes of the Well-Tempered Clavier. And probably in conjunction with the second part, that is in the late 1730s, he developed the idea not to demonstrate fugues in 24 different keys, but to exemplify on the basis of a single idea the fugal techniques as they would then constitute a genre that would result in individual movements of a different makeup. And you can tell from the way the Art of Fugue is composed that he starts with a retrospective approach. In other words, he starts with 4 fugues that sound like 16th century music, and then the style progresses in a remarkable way, because he animates the subject in rhythmic ways, in melodic ways. He modernizes it. In fact, to some in some movements, he writes stylistically in his most modern way. And the canons, for example, are perhaps the best examples of music that actually foreshadows music composed after 1750. So I think the Art of Fugue as a practical textbook exemplifies his legacy as a fugue writer. And I think he quite deliberately wanted to focus on the fugue in his last decade. I mean, the fugue, the art of fugue was not written, within just a few years. He spent quite some time on it, and he expanded it, and he finally decided to publish it. And he happened to start the printing process, but wasn't able to see through the completed project.
Now, I may have misunderstood this, but did you also hypothesize that the Klavierübung could have eventually been understood by Bach as a six-part set, that sort of six-part symmetry that he found throughout his life, which would have eventually included the Welttemperklavier Book 2 and the Art of Fugue as the parts 5 and 6?
Well, I think, Bach deliberately didn't give the Art of Fugue the title or subtitle Klavierübung. So I think he considered it a separate project. I believe that the four parts of the Klavierübung are self-contained and contain the most advanced ways of modern keyboard music. I mean, if you think of the aria with 30 variations, the so-called Goldberg variations, there is nothing like it that, ever occurred prior to Bach. So I think he wanted to have music for performance presented in the Klavierübung. The Art of Fugue also, of course, is to be performed, but it has a theoretical element that the Klavierübung does not have. So I would keep it separately.
Talking about Bach's legacy and talking about him preserving the legacy perhaps of other composers, did he somehow become aware of the fact that maybe the art was dying, that no generation after him would have the same compositional technique, and that it was up to him to preserve the art?
I don't think he thought of it that way. I mean, Bach was a very dedicated teacher. He had dozens and dozens of students, and he was sure that the art of composition would proceed, that it would most likely proceed in very different ways from what he would be doing, because he could see that on the basis of the music his own sons were writing, and he did not disapprove of that. But I think he, when it comes to the Art of Fugue, he was thinking of putting together something that would summarize his own knowledge and the way he could push the limits of the art of fugal composition. I don't think that he would think that this would be the end of fugal writing, but I believe he said, this is as far as I can take it. And maybe future generations would look at it and maybe learn something from it, even if they would depart from it in their own way.
And we certainly have, which is sort of my last question, which is that I feel the young Bach is searching sort of for a concrete form, like you've called it, the autonomous design. And in at least the last decade of his life, he offers us these canonic pieces which are not necessarily, they don't seem to be final statements. They seem to pose the question of, could it be carried out in 14 additional canons? Could something else be done on it? And I sort of wonder if we are carrying on Bach's legacy through every strange computer variation that we have on this, through every recording of the Art of Fugue on electric guitars or harps or whatever that is.
No, I think you are absolutely right. I think Bach's legacy is a challenge. And I think that the composer himself knew that it was a challenge, and he left it at that. And I think composers like Mozart and Beethoven accepted that challenge, went their own ways. But I think in quite a number of ways, later composers, and it goes, well into the 21st century, composers and performers see Bach's art as a continuing challenge. And the good thing is that it's a wonderful challenge because it's so rich and it's so much fun for both the performer and the listener.
I announced on Instagram that I would be interviewing you, and I invited people to write in a few questions. The first one is from a user who asks, why did Bach do the entire coffee house, coffee cantata thing? Was it for exposure? What was that all about?
Well, in a way, he celebrated the most fashionable way to spend an afternoon or an evening, among friends, drinking coffee. So coffee was a commodity that was fashionable at the time, much more fashionable than, let's say, wine or liqueur as a convivial way of being together. So it's just a little advertisement for this kind of gathering at a coffee house. And we have to imagine that it was a very luxurious outfit, the Zimmermann Coffee House. It's not a Starbucks outfit. So, we have to see the context as quite fashionable.
Another Instagram user says, what's the first BWV that pops into your head right now? And who are the top 3 Bach interpreters that also come into your head?
Well, I think it's the Goldberg variations that come to my head, and I'm thinking of very many performers whom I admire. I mean, it is Gustav Leonhardt or Robert Hill on the harpsichord. It's Anders Schiff or Rudolph Serkin, whom I heard perform the piece. He never recorded it, but it's a piece that comes in so many performances and is so exciting, and perhaps the piece that shows Bach from a side that no other piece does, namely his virtuoso abilities and his intellectual penetration of the material.
Do you play Bach every day?
Not every day. I used to play Bach a lot. I was brought up as a performer, but when I got full-time into musicology, I stopped really performing in public, but I kept performing for myself and performing with my children. Now with my hands plagued by with arthritis, I have trouble doing it. But I continue moving my fingers, and I have take great enjoyment with my clavichord, which gives me possibility to intimately deal with Bach and other composers' music.
Now, are you aware that at least in one academic circle, you are known as the Big Bad Wolff?
No, I'm not.
Really? Okay. Okay, well, there it is. Just a little bit of parting advice. Could you, as one of the most knowledgeable people in the world about one of the greatest geniuses who ever lived, what would you say to someone who says, excuse me, but I don't see the point in learning about music from this particular culture, from someone who died 270 years ago? I don't see the point in learning about that more than my current musical taste.
Well, I have not found a person who would address me that way. But if it were to happen, I would say listen to the music of Bach, and if you listen with an open ear and an open heart, there are lots of questions that come up, and they may not be scholarly questions, but they may be questions that relate to the fact, what makes it, what qualities in Bach's music touch you immediately, so that it enriches your mind, and it touches your feelings. And this is something that I think opens up all kinds of possibilities in exploring music much beyond the paper on which it was written or printed.
Well, Herr Wolff, it's been a true delight to have you on the podcast here, and so thanks very much for your time.
My pleasure.
Thanks for listening, folks. One question my devoted listeners realized that I had forgot to ask Mr. Wolff was, if you had to explain what the art of fugue is to a child, what would you say? He kindly wrote me back a response, and this is what he said. Think of it foremost as a set of variations on a single melody. The initial melody or theme is easy to remember, and it's fun to recognize wherever it appears, even if upside down or modified in other ways. It opens every movement and then penetrates the musical texture by constantly changing itself. The whole work is much too long for you, and the music gets more and more challenging. But if you just take the first few movements, it is fun to pursue the return of a traveling melody. So thank you very much, Mr. Wolff, for that beautiful response. Thanks to Robert Hill for arranging this interview. Thanks to all my fans who take the time to write me and give me feedback and donations and suggestions for future episodes. You could be sure that once we are finished with this next fugue, the 14th, the final fugue in the Art of Fugue, I will be coming out with episodes on a more regular basis, because I won't be attacking such a giant work as systematically. But for now, we have one final fugue to tackle, and that's the unfinished fugue. You've been waiting for it for quite some time.
You are listening to the W.T.F. Bach podcast.
Do you want to partner with us? Write us at the W.T.F. Bach podcast. Send us a donation on Venmo, Cash App, or PayPal at WTF Bach. Help keep this podcast alive. Support us. Find the links in the episode description.
What a great day to be listening to W.T.F. Bach. Thank you for listening.